What's a horrifying, creepy experience you have lived through? Serious. U/chemical_reality 4606 responded. We had a guy who was picking up women in the college town area I lived in and murdering them and dumping them down this road I would bike down to get my ex-BF's parents' house LD visit occasionally. I was walking around college town in broad daylight and this guy in a beige-looking car pulled over and asked me if I wanted a ride. I kept walking and I turned down my street to walk back to my house and he pulled in and tried to cut me off with his car. Immediately, he hops out and tries to grab me and I started to run. It just so happened someone a little further down that street had gotten pulled over and I started to scream for the police. He gets in his car and peels off. They caught the guy murdering women some time later. It was that very same douchebag. I almost lost my shit when I seen it on TV. U/Jackfair responded. I was leaving my friend's place and I hopped on the light trail. I passed by the large Christmas tree lighting in downtown and I remember thinking I forgot it was that night. It's an event I'm aware of but have only attended once. Anyway, so I kept going. I get home. Walk in the door pondering if I want to order a pizza while thinking I turn on the TV and flip to the news where they start telling the story of the arrest of a guy a bit earlier. The news says this guy had been planning to blow up the tree lighting event but the FBI had set him up with a fake bomb and luckily he'd never realized it was a dud. The time he pressed the button was around the same time I was passing by. I felt really creeped out by that for a while. U/TX Pineywoods responded. Was doing Illinois archaeological mapping of fighting bunkers body recovery in the Pacific. We were in one cave that was used as a holdout mapping the area and documenting for the local government. My flashlight caught all this glinting shiny stuff in the cave floor and I was like, oh damn, that's pretty, what's going on here? I walked closer and in the dark under my flashlight I realized it was a fuckload of human teeth that got blown apart and mashed into the mud of the cave floor. Looked down and I was standing on more teeth and other parts. It's strange how fast something that looks so pretty can turn sad and creepy. I sat for a sec to look around and it got a lot worse the more I looked. Plenty more to the story but that's the general idea. That was a wild project and the things I saw during that one will stay with me for a long time. It's haunting but in a sad way, not scary. Just knowing that civilians were in that cave as well when everything blew up with the soldiers that came in and used it as well. The civilians couldn't leave and the soldiers weren't going to give up alive. Part of the doctrine of that particular fighting force in the Pacific Theater at the time. So many shoes, high heels, picture frames, family heirlooms that folks had taken as they ran for safety. Parts of people were absolutely everywhere in that damn cave. Crazy ass day at work for sure. U/Doublestitch responded. On deployment with the Navy, a 19-year-old lookout spotted a dead body in the ocean. So the crew did the decent thing and brought on board, double-bagged it, put it in a freezer, and handed it over to the local authorities at our next port visit. Not to go too far into the gory details, there were enough teeth left to identify it by dental records. Somebody had to clean the wire stretcher that had brought it in. And despite the common acronym for Navy, never again volunteer yourself, I knew another teenager would be assigned that chore unless somebody more mature took it on. So I volunteered. The corpsmen provided PPE and iodine and I gave it a good scrubbing. Sailors being what they are, 2 rumors ran around the crew that week. Don't eat the peas because the body had purportedly been stored next to the frozen peas. It wasn't, according to both the corpsmen and the CSAs, and there's still skin on that stretcher. This was also untrue. Yet having been the fool who had volunteered for that work, I got ordered to clean the stretcher a second time. Every crude joke imaginable made the rounds too. What's his name? Bob, etc. Much to the distress of the lookout who had spotted the body and reported it. Took her aside to say a few kind words to the effect of there's a family that will be able get closure because of her, she did a good deed. U/Kathy got cupcakes responded. So one night I woke up to get some water, it was around 1 a.m. As I go to the kitchen I hear like 10 neighborhood dogs barking. I stood there for like 5 minutes and they don't stop barking. I am creeped out and too scared to look out the window. I finally gather up all the courage left in me and look out the kitchen window to see a hooded figure trying to break in through the backyard gate which was locked. I literally wanted to scream but I called 911 while I was hiding in my bedroom looking out through my bedroom window. By the time the cops came he had broken my back door. Turns out he was a robber and thought nobody was in the house because he had been watching my house for like 5 days and I never left the house or opened the windows. He had a gun and would have fucking killed me if he found out I was there. He had committed 2 murders already and the police were looking for him for like 2 weeks. U/AU-78 responded. Warning, graphic content. Before my meds to help control these, I used to get, well, flashbacks. They would be triggered by sound or dreams, nightmares rather. Being a former firefighter, I could smell smoke, burnt skin and flesh, LD break out into an instant sweat, get disoriented and be terrified, even though I had never felt consciously terrified while on assignment. I would dream about calls, some I knew I had been on and others I had to ask some of the guys about. Turns out that there were entire calls from 25 plus years ago that I don't even remember. Calls where a backyard burn blew up in a guy's face and the skin on his arms started peeling off. When we arrived, they were hanging off a good 8-inch like gloves. I can still see the look of terror in his eyes. All of this started after I finished my chemotherapy and radiation treatments in 2012, followed up by a bad rear-end car accident in 2014 with a TBI. Before I sought help for this *T, things were bad, really bad. You/Frogo Jumper responded. When I was 6L, lived in a house and there was a train track right behind us. One day my sister and I were playing in the backyard and we heard a train about to go past, so we scrambled onto the trampoline to watch it go by. The backyard was built in a way that if you were a kid you'd be too short to see the train tracks without being on the trampoline, but if you were an adult you could stand on the patio and watch the trains go past, and it was a very clear view. My sister and I somehow didn't see the old man get ran over by the train, but my mum did and immediately ran out and demanded that we get inside. Since my dad's a veteran and veterans have high suicide rates, my mum texted him just to make sure it wasn't him, and when we found out it wasn't and he was still at the army base, she calmed down a lot. About an hour later, a forensics team came to pick up all the little itty-bitty chunks of dead guy that had been left on the tracks, and our neighbors asked if they could come over with beers and watch. We was so fucking inhumane and cruel. I just feel so bad because that man would have been in earshot listening to my sister and Elle pretend the chickens were dinosaurs while he contemplated throwing himself in front of a freight train. I didn't find out what had happened until a few months ago. You/minimum 4609 responded. Driving around country lanes, southeast England, late at night with 2 other friends, bored, young and had no responsibility. This was a weeknight. A man appeared from the woods in front who had a ghostly white face, what seemed like black holes for eyes, no expression on his face, and had what I can only describe as 17th century clothing on, like a white rough thing on his neck, and the rest was all black. He was just looking through us. We all went from laughing and chatting to deathly quiet, and none of us looked around once we passed him. I remember thinking, "Don't look around behind me." The others said they had the same thought. None of us had taken drugs or been drinking, and we still talk about it to this day. I'm sure there must have been an explanation like a fancy dress do or something, but this was midweek and in the middle of literally nowhere. You/You want to sleep 8 hours responded. Going down the hill in my car, goes from national speed limit to 20 miles per hour, so I slow down way before, pass a car waiting for me since the lane is narrow, and see 4 cars at the bottom of the hill all in a line barely moving. Like it is eerie. They are all next to parked cars, so I have got to slow down to let them pass, but something is off. I go to press my brake, nothing. Press my brake again, nothing. No friction, no nose, no change in the car's movement. Literally stop registering anything and my body's autopilot takes over. I remember I am doing 17 miles per hour at this point, so thank God I slowed down. I am about to crash into the first parked car, but I have to swerve into the opposite pavement and hedge to avoid the car next to it. Car comes to a stop and for a second I am just absolutely clueless what the hell happened. It is like a dream. This is what black ice is, true black ice. Appears from nowhere, looks like normal road. Wasn't even icy anywhere else, so no warning it would be there. Thankfully I only got a slight dent where the car hit the parked car in the corner. That eerie feeling is there to warn you things aren't right. If it happens when you are driving, stop and assess the road. It could save your life. You/27 Jarvis responded. I was house-sitting, pet-sitting at a house in the mountains west of Denver. It was early evening. I was outside throwing the ball for the 2 golden retrievers when out of the blackness came a scream that sounded like a woman. I froze. The dogs immediately started growling and snarling into the darkness that surrounded the house. I heard the scream again, and the 3rd or 4th time I realized that the scream sounded nearly identical every time, which almost made it more terrifying. I rushed the dogs inside and made sure all the doors and windows were locked. I nearly called 911, but the scream was so consistent in pitch and duration that I went to the internet to figure out if it could be an animal. Turns out, the roar of a mountain lion can often sound like a woman is being bludgeoned. This is definitely up there for most frightening experiences in my life. You/mad_man_student responded. Went on a family holiday to Barcelona in 2017 during the summer. Walking towards La Rambla and see everyone running away screaming and looking panicked. Saw injured people limping away, some literally dragging themselves across the street. We took shelter in a cafe and watched the news of the terrorist attack that happened with a van that plowed through the big crowd, with the attacker still on the loose. There was a man punching the wall and in floods of tears watching the news shouting "No, no, no." The news said shopkeepers are being advised not to shelter people around La Rambla, and we all got kicked out into the empty streets. Had to walk across the city to get to an open train station, and everyone around us was clearly shaken up. Pretty grim experience in such a beautiful city. U/Haystack67 responded. February 2020. All working junior doctors in the hospital summoned to the lecture hall and informed that we were essentially at DEFCON 1. That they would try their best not to overwork us, but that, with limited knowledge, there was a reasonable chance that most of us would catch this inscrutable potentially deadly disease within the next year. We had all seen the chest x-rays from London. Those remain the most horrific images LVE ever seen. In the early days of COVID, people's airways could be about 60% fluid and 40% air. Combined with the knowledge that our PPE was essentially being redirected to more competent and/or less corrupt governments. I can't count the number of times I was asked to perform a medical procedure on a catatonic COVID patient, in a non-ventilated room, with them breathing on my bare skin throughout. U/Wuffies responded. Mother died of cancer in early 2013 while in hospice care. She had passed into a comatose state in the middle of texting one of her friends. We discovered the unsent message on her phone. We never finished the message and thus never sent it either. Fast forward a few weeks, past the funeral and into the stages of handling her will and talks with her lawyer. At this time one of my brothers held onto her phone, will stuff. One day, it received a message from our deceased mother. I don't quite recall the message contents, but we received a few more messages from her over the next almost 2 weeks. I recall them being reminders or something. It was unnervingly interesting to say the least. We'd initially set up alert reminders for her to take her pain medication. She was on some 4 mg opiate pain meds and 800 mg of paracetamol as a safety net while at home and conscious, but the reminders were disabled. So we contacted the telecoms provider Mum used and had to explain, twice, to the poor support person what the issue was. They had to take a few moments to bring their supervisor in on the call because of the strangeness of the call. They looked through her phone history, couldn't find anything regarding any calls or texts from that mobile number, yet we had the messages which were sent in as evidence. They said it would be looked into and, sure enough, about a week later they called back and said they found the issue. Mum had set up some sort of business reminder clause thing which was sent in her name to her phone. That she managed to uncover and stop. U/deleted responded. When I was 15 my BF and I had gone out to smoke weed. My dad was against weed but we would sneak out to some place in the forest, smoke, and play basketball at a court nearby. It was probably close to 1 a.m. when we were walking back home. When we got to the entrance of my neighborhood I saw a guy staring at us in the Home Depot parking lot. He was far away so I didn't thinking anything of it. I thought maybe he was a security guard even though that doesn't make any sense lol. Anyways I saw something shiny in his hand and we thought it could be knife but we just figured it's probably his phone. We waved and he did nothing. We were high so we were thinking more so about getting caught. Anyways right when we get inside my neighborhood I hear footsteps slamming the ground. I didn't look back and just grabbed my friend's arm and yelled to run. We just kept running and the guy said nothing to us. I'm pretty sure if we stopped to turn around when I first heard he would have gotten to us. Right when we got inside my house I looked out the window and he was staring at me 5 to 10 feet away from the door. A day or two later the same guy shot, killed, and played with the bodies of 2 teenagers across the street from my house. I still regret not calling the police but I was scared to get in trouble, high so I wasn't thinking clearly, and I think some part of me wanted to think he just wanted to rob us. Edit. It's even worse BC I went to school with the girl that he killed. She was a couple years older than me and when I was in kindergarten she was my reading buddy. Our school paired one older kid to a younger kid. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one. If you enjoyed this video and want to dive even deeper into our community, consider becoming a channel member. Members get exclusive perks like early access to videos, custom emojis, shoutouts, etc. And it's a great way to support the channel so I can keep bringing you the content you love.